Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name's Sharma. When I was 17, I wrote an open letter to the UK government, specifically to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, asking him to stop the flood of junk food advertising on my phone and on my TV. To my surprise, that letter didn't just sit unread. It turned into a partnership. Jamie Oliver, young campaigners, and health experts stood alongside me, and together we got into Downing Street. That campaign was even mentioned in the Queen's speech, and it helped pave the way for the UK to ban online junk food advertising. For me, that moment showed the true power of partnership, how people from different backgrounds, with different kinds of influence, can come together and make change happen when it almost feels impossible. But my relationship with food goes a lot more deeper than campaigning. I grew up in a city called Leicester in the United Kingdom, in a community where there were more fried chicken shops than fresh fruit and vegetables, living in what many of you would call a food desert. And that's shaped the world that I witness and how I see in my walk to school and back. Food has always been personal to me. It's been about health, yes, but it's also been about fairness, dignity, and identity. So that's why this session matters. Food is deeply political. It can divide us, but it can also be the bridge that brings us together. So the question today in this panel is, what makes these partnerships work in practice? How can food really be that collaborative advantage when politics stalls? And 20-year-old me is really excited to say I'm joined by these world experts. We've got Mark Watts, Executive Director at the C40 Cities, leading nearly 100 mayors in bold climate and food action. We've got Gunn, the Director General of Norad, Norway's development agency, bringing the donor perspective on building and financing partnerships. And lastly, we've got Jose, who's the program chair at the New Institute and the former Minister of Production in Peru. He's worked on everything from culinary diplomacy to protecting traditional markets that feed millions of people. We're going to keep this fast, candid, and practical. The aim isn't to celebrate collaboration in theory, but it's to dig how it really works, where it succeeds, where it struggles, and what lessons we can carry forward. So let's dive straight in. My first question is to Jose. I want to talk about food as a bridge in polarized contexts. Now, Peru's cuisine is now world famous. Lima even has the world's #1 restaurant. That is culinary diplomacy at its best. So you participated in supporting government chef partnerships. Can you tell me a bit more about it? And also, you've argued that traditional markets are the backbone of food access for the poor, but they're chronically underfunded. When you were the Minister of Production, you've worked in partnerships with them to improve the condition. What would you recommend mayors today about investing in those markets?
Thank you very much, Dev. This is very interesting to reflect on two different partnerships and the differences and the challenges that I had with chefs and that I had with traditional food markets. More than 50 years ago, I was a young vice minister of production also in Peru. And that was a time when we were supporting the internationalization of Peruvian cuisine. At that point, it was kind of unknown, like extremely exotic. I think it's still now. But it wasn't, it didn't get the recognition that now it gets. So we partnered for many years. I was one of many public officials that worked together with chefs to promote the Peruvian cuisine. Like you mentioned, Jamie Oliver, we had Gaston Acurio, Virgilio Martinez from Central that also won the Best Restaurant Award a few years ago, Micha from Maido, that is the current top restaurant in the world, according to this list. But it was a partnership that they had the initiative, we supported, and it got a lot of media attention. It was one of those initiatives that a politician dreams of. No? I remember in a stage similar to this one, the chefs were inaugurating like the main food fair, and the president was dying. The president of the country was dying to be there in a picture for the newspapers and for TV with the chefs. So it went well. That was like more than 15 years ago, and now Peruvian cuisine is recognized all over the world. It promoted some interesting policies related to healthy food access, to food markets actually, to biodiversity and banning GMOs, which is controversial, but at that point we promoted that. But it's very different from the other partnership. 5 years ago, I was Minister of Production of Peru, and we decided that promoting traditional food markets, which provide 70% of the food that is eaten in Peru, that was a priority, and that it was going to be a political priority. These traditional food markets are essential not only in Peru, but in many countries in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. But they have been deemed as obsolete, as a relic from the past. No? The future is supermarkets, the past is traditional food markets. That's why when we started supporting these markets, everybody was surprised, saying like, why are you supporting this? They are like destined for extinction. No? So in the end, we did it. We achieved a lot. We formed a broad partnership with all the ministries that had to do with food safety, with infrastructure, with innovation, with finance, actually, one of the most important ministries in every country, to support for the first time the traditional food markets. And I'll finish with this. The difference is that we didn't get the media attention. With the chefs, every newspaper, TV channel was covering us. With traditional food markets, nobody necessarily cared about it. They were low-income people that didn't have time for meetings, that probably didn't go well in like interviews in TV, no? But they were fundamental for food access. When we finished the administration, they were almost crying, saying that for the first time, they felt that they were not invisible. And that's, for me, like the key takeaway from this. We should start seeing the priority of the partnerships with people that don't give us like the flashy headlines, that don't give us like many attention as policy makers or as international NGOs or as donors, no? And focus on those that have more impact on food access.
Very inspired by that. It's very rare. Very, very rare that you hear a politician who is able to transgress the short-termism that's embedded in our institutions and actually look for the little man. And it's often the little man and the farmers and these people who don't make the flashy headlines who deserve a lot of our help and want to be supported on this journey. Mark, I want to talk to you about the role of cities as innovators and connectors. Cities are where people experience food systems directly, whether that's school food for me, markets, or public procurement. They're close to citizens, but often they're caught between national government and local realities. So let me put it like this. What role can cities play as innovators and connectors in food diplomacy? And could you share maybe the boldest example you've seen where a city's really stepped up, or even where national politics was slower, or maybe it was resisting it?
Yeah, well, I think we've already heard some great examples today, and we've had the mayor of Stockholm on the stage just now, and then I thought that brilliant example from Andrea in Quezon City earlier about how they're supporting urban agriculture. But I think what we generally kind of start from is city governments, at least in the big cities, which is what C40 works with. They're generally the single biggest procurer of food within the geographical area of the city because they serve in schools, often in health centres, older people's homes, prisons. So they've got a lot of market power. We've seen a group of our cities now working to use that to try and introduce the planetary health diet in the meals that they serve. Some really great progress. So across that group of cities, a 44% increase in the amount of plant-based protein in the meals that they serve since 2019, and a 14% reduction in meat-based protein, but done very much in partnership with children in schools, with their parents, with the communities, so that transition is supported. But also that there's the focus on food waste, the food that cannot avoid being wasted at the moment. I thought the example from Quezon is fantastic there, that they're now really collecting that organic waste, using it for compost on this huge expansion of urban agriculture. We've seen similar things in a different economic paradigm in Seoul, for example. But actually, the last one that I've just come back from Climate Week in New York and seeing there a mayor who has really make sure the option is available for plant-based food in schools and hospitals, and then seen a massive uptake in, I think, 25–30% uptake across the public board, but now partnering with some very big companies in New York to follow the example of the public sector now that it's been shown that you don't need to be scared about introducing more plant-based protein. You don't need to be scared about talking to people about a planetary health diet. You can do it, and people will really support it, and they're moving that out into the private sector.
Incredible. I find it really interesting how you can form these partnerships whilst balancing the line between being seen as something too top-down and getting citizen buy-in. But let's get to that later, and we'll come back to that. Gunn, I love the work that you do, and it's incredible across the world. But we live in a world of crises, and they just don't stop. Crises from COVID to the climate shock. These have disrupted food systems, but they've also shaken up entrenched politics within them. So from a donor perspective, what's an example where a crisis forced unlikely partners to come together? And what maybe made that collaboration stick?
Well, thank you, Dev. And before diving into the details of the questions, maybe a few points also that I would like to pick up from the other speakers. I think what you said about giving people a voice, I think initially that's the core at what we do in international development assistance and forming partnerships that will give people a voice, and I don't know if it's the little man or woman, but the ones we are there to affect the lives of. So I think I really like that approach that you said, and that we also have a responsibility then to do that as partners. And I think also what you said about the crisis, and I was in the high-level week and the climate week last week in New York, and I think it's very important that we, as international donors, as activists, as partners, also try to showcase that the fact that people are really committed and engaged, countries are engaged, organizations are engaged, people are cities, mayors, because there's so much negative voice coming out describing how multilateral cooperation, how development assistance, how sort of activism is pointless. I have these conversations a lot with my teenagers at home that, what you do is no point, but it is. The majority of countries in the world and organizations are really, really committed to this agenda and providing a voice for people. So maybe to use that as an example also, I think the focus, I think, from New York is that we are in a large crisis. The UN is sort of falling apart. There's not enough money. But I think you really see people gathering and governments gathering to look at how we can make this ship continue to sail, to put it like that. And it's really on the concrete deliverables. And in my team, we have scientists, we have economists, we have people with a lot of different expertise who sit down diving into the details of how we can form partnerships that will release new funding, that can attract the private sector. We have discussions with philanthropists, but I think also for us to be a bit brave as donors to take that risk, because we have funds. They're not endless, and we can't solve this alone with the ODA, but we have to share that knowledge and to form those partnerships that can lead to something new. So, yeah, I can try to answer at least some of your part of your question. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm really interested. So I've got these incredible leaders sitting right next to me, and you guys have worked in some of the coolest rooms across the world. You've spoken to the most craziest of people, but also some of the craziest of egos. And partnership, of course, works under leadership. So in every partnership, inevitably somebody has to take the hit so that the group can move forward. Now, what does leadership actually look like in those moments? Is it being the loudest? Is it being the first to compromise? Or is it taking the hit publicly so that the collaboration survives? Happy for any of you to take.
Well, I mean, I think leadership in the political context in which I work is not looking at where people are at now and trying to move your policies to be there, because that will inevitably go to where the most powerful interests are taking you. But it's taking advantage of the privilege you have of having really good data, amazing advice coming in, and working out what you can do to help everybody move themselves forward. And in the case of what we're talking about here, that everybody has access to a planetary health diet, you're inevitably going to come under attack if you take leadership, because you're going to be confronting powerful interests. But as long as you're working on the basis of good data, engaging people, giving people a chance to have better opportunity, you can always win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe Gunn, more specifically, when it comes to Norad's example, do the conflict between donors and the mayors and the ministers, do we expect too much of the mayors or ministers to take those hits when the donors hold the purse?
Tricky question. No, I think it's a very good question, but I think no. I think it was said on this stage earlier this morning also that, of course, this is the time for everybody to take action, including also partner countries, donors. We all have to shape up our national strategies and plans, so it's not a one-sided story. But no, I don't agree that it's not necessarily a conflict with that, because we have to base whatever we do on plans of, national plans and priorities of a country or a local organization we are working with. So I think if anybody is to take the hit, probably it should be us, and if you put it like in a bit of a tabloid way. But I agree that I think it's also the time to sort of showcase the concrete and specific partnerships that actually work. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I think you of course see the values which Norad stands upon, and you really love to think, but also you do see that these partnerships do value each other as much as the money is coming from one angle. You do work together.
And maybe I can just say one thing also. For us, we can also take that burden of stating in the board room meetings of UN organizations or the World Bank, or in dialogue with local governments, that gender equality, food security, climate, sustainable development goals, these are things that we should still work to respect and aim. And we know that for some partners it's not that easy today, for reasons that we are all aware of. So I think that's an arena where we, as a country and as a donor, can sort of carry some of that weight, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful to hear, like where the priorities stand. And of course, you can absorb some of those shocks a lot more than maybe those mayors who have to battle with internal domestic politics, which I bet you've seen a lot of, Jose. But I'm still interested. Like, partnerships, they do sound great, and we love to say that we're all aligned. But the real test is when they're not. So Mark, you want faster procurement. Gunn, you might need to report to your managers about donor reporting, where the money's going. Jose, you might need to defend informal vendors. So in those moments, who really gives way? Like, what is the politics of difference when not everyone can get their way?
That's a very interesting question, and I'll go back to your ego question, because I was reflecting, actually didn't do the prep for that one, but it's quite interesting, because of course at that point when we were working with chefs, I mentioned like the president wanted to be with them in the picture. The president of the country was dying to be there. And it was many of the older politicians, older generations, that were trying to use the prestige of the chefs to benefit themselves. And the chefs at one point used that way to get more political power, like very smart. But at other point, like resented. So there were like two types of politicians in the government. One probably like that I say I represent. I was younger at that moment. I could drink wine with them late at night, talking about the future of Peruvian cuisine. The next morning, probably we didn't remember everything that we said, but at the same time, we were creating these bonds that made this partnership strong. No? But on the other side, besides these ego anecdotes that I'm telling you about, I think it's more about power relations. No? And power inequities and power asymmetries that block many of the transformations on food systems. When I was working with traditional and informal food markets, I had to balance many of the power inequities that came, for example, from narratives I mentioned. No? Supermarkets are the future, traditional food markets are the past. Why are you working with them? They are obsolete, they are relics from the past. So they came from narratives, came from scarce resources. Why are we going to use them in something that is inefficient? I was frequently told by other public officials from different ministries. No? So I had to deal constantly, or we all had to deal in the partnership constantly with the power inequities that came from decades of thinking that these markets were something from the past. No? So that was the main challenge. How I was minister in a transitional period for almost a year. So it was a very short period of time to try to change the power inequities that had dominated the politics around food access for decades.
Yeah.
No? So that was the main challenge, but I think empowering a group of actors that were not empowered before, but zero empowerment, that empowering for a short period of time made a change. The marginal change is huge when you start from zero.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Mark just a very specific question before I come to all of you with your final thoughts. So C40 has been praised for its boldness, but it's also in headlines and a lot of these Reddit feeds, and kind of the general public sometimes see it as people who want to ban meat or dairy. We know those claims are false. As fact-checking shows, your work is about procurement. It's not bans, but perception matters, especially in today's day and age. Critics argue that food is cultural and personal in a way that transport and energy just can never be, and that pushing diet change above all risks fueling exactly the type of populism that can undermine climate change overall. So if partnerships are meant to unite rather than divide, then isn't legitimacy as important as metric as carbon savings? How do you balance the urgency of cutting food emissions with the political risk of provoking backlash that could erase those gains?
Well, I think you just have to face reality. If you're going to lead in any progressive way, you're going to face a hit because you're inevitably confronting powerful vested interests who protect their profit by constraining people from having choice. In this case, what our mayors are trying to do is make sure everybody's got the choice, the opportunity to access a planetary health diet, the diet that's best for their health and for the planet. And what they're confronting is really strong corporate interests that want to sell people products that don't meet those requirements. So again, we don't fear the backlash, right? It's inevitable. But I think what is really important is just that the message is it is about choice. It's about giving people the opportunity who can't currently access good, healthy food where they live, or whose children go to a school where they only serve junk food, instead giving them the opportunity to have a healthier diet and the information so that they can then make those choices themselves. And where that has been done, and it's been done really well in Milan, for example, those healthier, more plant-based protein school meals are more popular now than the meat alternatives that they're replacing.
So what I'm hearing is actually a lot of this is about narrative, and it's about the language that we use. And that sort of narrative shift that we've had with the climate, which everyone understands now that it's not the individual's responsibility. There are these companies that pump out huge tons of carbon emissions. We don't have that with food yet. People still believe the food is an individual's responsibility. And I guess as a takeaway would really be, let's start using more systems-based language. Let's create a youth quake, as I like to call it, amongst young people and within the general populace, that actually food is systemic, not individual, that we need to collectively decide to protect our health rather than individuals choosing their options. It's about the landscape and the environment that they grow up in. So on about language, I'm going to end on this final question. I'm on partnerships. You guys, I'm going to give you a final challenge, right? You all come from different worlds, different cities, different donor agencies, different national politics. But let's force convergence. If you had to co-design one case study in the next 12 months, something you could bring back next year at an EAT forum, what would it be? What would your beans-like issue be, which beans transgresses between climate, between poverty, it's cheap, it's good for the environment, it's good for supply chains? What would that issue be that you'd want everyone to work with you on? Please.
I go first. I'll tell you one we're about to launch. So it's an easy one. So we're about to launch with a group of our lower and middle income cities, an initiative that they're all able to offer universal school meals, not not a thing in a lot of our cities, but based on a planetary health diet. But allied to that, that they're also going to support the market traders across their cities so that they're able to also provide good, healthy food that everybody can access. And with a minimal food waste at the moment, 30–40% food waste because of a lack of refrigeration. So we want to support having renewably energy-powered refrigeration in all of those markets.
Incredible. Gunn, we've got 1 minute.
I will pick up on your food waste point. I think that could be my challenge, because I've learned that the food economic cost of food waste is $1 trillion almost, and 1/3 of the food lost, healthy or not, on its way from a farm to the market or to the table. It's 1/3 of it, it's lost. So I think we have a lot to gain there. Yep.
I have like 20 seconds. I would do a broader partnership with traditional food markets, but with chefs, with public canteens or community kitchens, to focus on providing healthy, affordable, sustainable, but also delicious food for the people that need it the most.
Thank you.
Can I say
Yes,
one thing in
quick
Tencent,
thing.
since I am a mother of teenagers, and they
Yes.
are so surprised that even in Norway there's a need to provide healthy school food because they have friends in school who are not have that privilege. So this is an issue that we share, all of us. So I think thank you for putting these concrete challenges to us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor. What I've heard today is that partnerships aren't just harmony. I think we can call them managed conflicts, compromise, and even a lot of courage. But because food is personal and political, of course, if we can make collaboration work here, it gives me hope that we can make it work anywhere. So please join me in thanking today's panelists.